يجب أن يستقيل في الساعات القادمة 20 أكتوبر 2020.
Good afternoon. You are watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Former French Prime Minister François Fillon meets with Prime Minister Tamam Slam and Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdel Latif Derian in Beirut. The UN General Assembly passes a resolution asking Israel to pay Lebanon more than $850 million in damages for an oil spill caused by an Israeli Air Force attack in 2006. And the Islamic State publicly executes a Syrian accused of planting traffic tracking devices for deadly government airstrikes in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Former French Prime Minister François Fillon has met with Prime Minister Tamam Slam and Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdel Latif Derian in Beirut. Fillon has held talks with Salam at the Grand Serai, and the two discussed developments in Lebanon and the region, as well as the Lebanese officials' recent visit to Paris. Salam was in Paris last week for talks on finalizing the Saudi-funded arms deal between Lebanon and France to provide the Lebanese army with much-needed equipment in its fight against terrorism. Fillon, who was prime minister during former President Nicolas Sarkozy's term, also met with Derian to congratulate him on his recent election as the head of Dar al-Fatwa, the highest Sunni council. Speaking after his meeting with the Grand Mufti, Fillon said he sought to congratulate Derian, emphasizing the importance of peaceful coexistence among various religions and the role religious figures have in the region to achieve peace. He also praised Derian for his moderation, openness and wisdom, saying Lebanon was a model of coexistence. The UN General Assembly has passed a resolution asking Israel to pay Lebanon more than $850 million in damages for an oil spill caused by an Israeli Air Force attack in its war against Hezbollah in 2006. The resolution, which passed late last night, said the environmental disaster resulted in an oil slick that covered the entire Lebanese coastline and extended to the Syrian coastline, causing extensive pollution. Israel has been asked by the UN to compensate Lebanon before, but this was the first time a price was put on the damages. General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding, but they do reflect world opinion. The Assembly voted 170 to 6 in favor, with 3 abstentions. Israel, the US, Canada, Australia, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands voted no. Transportation Minister Ghazi Zaiter says the Beirut airport remains in safe hands and that security was intact. During his tour of the Rafiq Hariri International Airport, the minister said, and I quote, "Everyone here is concerned with providing general safety at the airport, which is a vital element. We will not be lenient with the terrorists or whoever is behind them," he adds, especially when it comes to whatever has been rumored about security at the airport. His comments came days after he chaired a meeting for his ministry's committee tasked with developing a plan to improve security measures at the airport. The Lebanese army says it has arrested 7 people, including a Syrian terror suspect in the Mitten region and the northeastern town of Arsal. In a statement, the military said an army unit raided several locations in Sabtiya and Fanat and detained 2 Syrians, a Palestinian and 3 Lebanese. The detainees had light arms and drugs, as well as a number of cameras and telecommunication devices. In Arsal, the army arrested Syrian Muhammad Mustafa on suspicion of belonging to a terrorist organization and possessing suspicious documents. The Islamic State has publicly executed a Syrian accused of planting tracking devices for deadly government airstrikes. This is according to the site intelligence group, which posted footage of the accused being paraded before a crowd, but the video deliberately freezes at the point an ISIL fighter pulls his head back and holds a knife to his neck. After the execution in Syria's northern Aleppo province, the fighters paraded the body of the accused on a cross. ISIL claimed that more than 190 people had been killed in the airstrikes that the man had abetted. North Korea proposes a joint investigation with the US into the hacking attack against Sony Pictures Entertainment. That's coming up next. Welcome back. The Israeli military has attacked targets in the Gaza Strip in response to a rocket launch from the Palestinian territory into Israel. A spokesman for Gaza's health ministry said there were no casualties in the attack, the first airstrike by Israel on the Palestinian enclave since the summer truce that ended the deadly 50-day war between the states. The Israeli army confirmed the strike, which it said targeted a Hamas terror infrastructure site. On Friday, a rocket fired from Gaza hit an open field in southern Israel, Israeli police said, causing no casualties or damage. The Islamist militant movement, which has the de facto rule over Gaza, did not assume responsibility for the attack, the third such incident since the end of the fighting between the sides nearly 4 months ago. Hamas and Israel agreed on a ceasefire on August 26th, brokered by Egypt, ending 50 days of war, which resulted in the deaths of 2,140 Palestinians and 73 Israelis, most of them soldiers. U.S. President Barack Obama says normalized relations with Cuba will give the United States its best chance to influence the communist-ruled island, and he urges Congress to ease the U.S. economic embargo against Havana. Obama, who announced on Wednesday that Washington was restoring diplomatic relations with Havana, said the historic end of decades of hostility between the two countries will not bring quick changes, but ultimately would lead to greater freedom for the Cuban people.
I think it'd be unrealistic for me to map out exactly where Cuba will be. But change is going to come to Cuba. It has to. They've got an economy that doesn't work. They've been reliant for years, first on subsidies from the Soviet Union, then on subsidies from Venezuela. Those can't be sustained. That doesn't mean that over the next 2 years we can't anticipate them taking certain actions that we may end up finding deeply troubling, either inside of Cuba or with respect to their foreign policy. And that could put significant strains on the relationship. But that's true of a lot of countries out there where we have an embassy. And the whole point of normalizing relations is that it gives us a greater opportunity to have influence with that government than not. We cannot unilaterally bring down the embargo. That's codified in the Libertad Act. And what I do think is going to happen, though, is there's going to be a process where Congress digests it. There are bipartisan supporters of our new approach. There are bipartisan detractors of this new approach. People will see how the actions we take unfold. And I think there's going to be a healthy debate inside of Congress. And I will certainly weigh in. I think that ultimately we need to go ahead and pull down the embargo, which I think has been self-defeating in advancing the aims that we're interested in.
North Korea has proposed a joint investigation with the United States into the hacking attack against Sony Pictures Entertainment, warning of serious consequences if Washington does not cooperate. The call for a new investigation came a day after the Federal Bureau of Investigation said it had evidence Pyongyang was responsible for the attack, prompting President Barack Obama to declare that the United States would respond proportionately to the cyber attack.
Sony is a corporation. It suffered significant damage. There were threats against its employees. I am sympathetic to the concerns that they faced. Having said all that, yes, I think they made a mistake. We cannot have a society in which some dictator someplace can start imposing censorship here in the United States. Because if somebody is able to intimidate folks out of releasing a satirical movie, imagine what they start doing when they see a documentary that they don't like, or news reports that they don't like. Or even worse, imagine if producers and distributors and others start engaging in self-censorship because they don't want to offend the sensibilities of somebody whose sensibilities probably need to be offended. Again, I'm sympathetic that Sony as a private company was worried about liabilities and this and that and the other, I wish they'd spoken to me first. I would have told them, do not get into a pattern in which you're intimidated by these kinds of criminal attacks. And many of them can do some damage. The FBI announced today that, and we can confirm that North Korea engaged in this attack. I think it says something interesting about North Korea that they decided to have the state mount an all-out assault on a movie studio because of a satirical movie starring Seth Rogen and James Flacco. I love Seth, and I love James, but the notion that that was a threat to them, I think gives you some sense of the kind of regime we're talking about here.
And still on the issue, Sony Pictures Entertainment Chief Executive and Chairman Michael Linton came out to defend his company after Obama said the entertainment giant made a mistake in yanking the interview from movie theaters. While appearing on CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS, Linton underscored that the company was not responsible for the move. In the interview, Linton provided a fulsome defense of his company. Have a listen.
We have not caved, we have not given in, we have persevered, and we have not backed down. We have always had every desire to have the American public see this movie. In this instance, the president, the press, and the public are mistaken as to what actually happened. We do not own movie theaters. We cannot determine whether or not a movie will be played in movie theaters. So, to sort of rehearse for a moment the sequence of events, we experienced the worst cyber attack in American history and persevered for 3.5 weeks under enormous stress and enormous difficulty, and all with the effort of trying to keep our business up and running and get this movie out into the public. When it came to the crucial moment, when a threat came out from what was called the GOP at the time, threatening audiences who would go to the movie theaters, the movie theaters came to us one by one over the course of a very short period of time. We were completely surprised by it, and announced that they would not carry the movie. At that point in time, we had no alternative but to not proceed with the theatrical release on the 25th of December.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Former French Prime Minister François Fillon meets with Prime Minister Tamam Slam and Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdel Latif Derian in Beirut. The UN General Assembly passes a resolution asking Israel to pay Lebanon more than $850 million in damages for an oil spill caused by an Israeli Air Force attack in 2006. And the Islamic State publicly executes a Syrian it accused of planting tracking devices for deadly government airstrikes in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Those are your Saturday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.
يجب أن يستقيل في الساعات القادمة 20 أكتوبر القادمة.